Okay.
All right.
Just give us 1 minute and then it should be ready to go.
Ready?
Yes, I think so. Yep.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Montgomery County House Delegation's Economic Development Committee's first briefing on COVID's impact on our economy and small businesses. My name is Delegate Lily Chee. I am new chair of this committee, and with me are my wonderful colleagues, Vice Chair of this committee, Delegate Jared Solomon, please wave, and former chair of this committee, Delegate Ariana Kelly, whose example I am trying to follow, and the Delegate Ann Kaiser, who is chair of the Ways and Means Committee, which, by the way, is critically important to economic development, and Delegate Kirill Resnick, as well as Delegate Leslie Lopez. Welcome, and I also want to welcome all of my colleagues from Senator Susan Lee, thank you for joining us, and Senator Nancy King, thank you for joining us, and our Majority Leader, Eric Luedtke, for joining us as well. Before I go on, I want to first point out that community members are watching on YouTube on our Montgomery County Delegation's YouTube channel, which is easily accessible. Before I move forward, I want to first take a moment to acknowledge the wonderful work of Michelle Purcell, who has been such a wonderful staffer supporting the Montgomery County Delegation's work. This might be her last Zoom gig for any committee work, so thank you. And I also want to welcome Rebecca Stryer. Rebecca, please wave. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to working with you. I'm glad our delegate, Mark Coleman, actually I forgot to acknowledge, did not scare you away after all these years. It's been 8 months since the pandemic has forced us to dramatically change courses of our lives. As the state's largest economy, Montgomery County has been hit very hard in both job losses and the loss of business revenues. So today we are having our first of the 2 briefings to understand where we are as an economy, how COVID has really affected us, and how the state legislature can be a strong partner in growing our economy and helping our community recover. I'm very pleased to have several economic development leaders joining us today. Ben Wu is the CEO of the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. Also, Gigi Godwin, President and CEO of the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce, and Dr. Marty Rosendale, who is the CEO of the Maryland Tech Council, followed by remarks and insights from small business representatives and the community leaders, Julie Varadi, Mickey Paplon, and Carmen Larson. So I'm going to turn it over to Ben. Please take it away. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Delegate Chee, and thank you.
I'm so sorry. I want to acknowledge Delegate Pam Quinn as well, my wonderful colleague from Economic Matters Committee. Sorry, please, thank you.
Well, thank you, Delegate Chee, and thank you for your leadership as the new chair of the Economic Development Committee. You know, it's clear that the pandemic will require all of us to work together to provide an economic recovery that will get us to the other side of this crisis. You know, earlier this year, MCDC was invited by Delegation Chairman Corman to brief all of you in Annapolis at the start of the General Assembly session about Montgomery County's economy. And so we partnered at that time with the Chamber of Commerce and the Maryland Tech Council for that briefing so that we could give you a well-rounded perspective about our economy. And we've recreated this partnership again today to discuss how COVID-19 is impacting our economy, especially our small businesses. When we were last with you in Annapolis, we could not have conceived that we would be facing soon a global public health emergency, the greatest economic devastation of our lifetime, and social and political unrest that are also creating significant economic disruptions. But as a state, we have pulled together and while we see very strong positives, especially relative to job growth, I understand we're number 7 now in the country, we're also seeing an uneven recovery, especially for our small businesses. And so what we wanted to do was present to you a data analytical view of where we are now so that you can assess how this COVID-19 has impacted our economy and also how we're faring in the recovery. So I'd like to turn it over to Brandon Bedford Brandon is our lead research director for the EDC, and he can give you a snapshot of where we are and what we'll be facing and continue to face as we try to recover.
Great, thank you so much, Ben-Wu. Thank you, Delegate Chi, for putting this together, and thank you, Montgomery County delegation, for all of the work you do, and for taking time this morning to meet with all of us to learn a little bit more about what's happening on the ground in Montgomery County. I'll start by saying that I've kept this presentation brief. So this is by no means a comprehensive view of every data point out there. We're rapidly changing the data we're using. Really, this economic change is so unprecedented. A lot of traditional data sets don't even keep up with it quite to the pace of the change. So I did my best to try to consolidate this, but if you want to reach out to me for more insights or information, brandon@thinkmoco.com is my email address. And I do intend to circulate this presentation for reference afterwards. I do believe that I am set up to have screen share. So just a second, and it should be shared. I just threw together a couple of slides. Again, not completely comprehensive, but this is what we have. Just a second. Can you see my screen, the Montgomery County COVID update? Oh, did I lose everyone?
No, we can see you.
Oh, you can. Okay, perfect. Okay, great. So just wanted to start by saying the economy has changed quite a bit. So the first thing we'll take a look at is Montgomery County resident employment in COVID. So this is in reference to people who live in Montgomery County regardless of where they work. And the majority of Montgomery County residents actually work in Montgomery County. So this can help with understanding the jobs a little bit as well. So you can see in March of 2020, right before the pandemic, we had one of the lowest unemployment rates on record in Montgomery County. It was about 2.8%. The only month that was lower was a month in 2019 where it was 2.5%, and 3% is considered about full employment. So those are really impressive numbers. And that really is the story of Montgomery County, is that we usually are doing much better than the rest of the nation and are definitely on par with the region. Though those two facts remain true in COVID, we are seeing record-breaking unemployment. In May of 2020, our county's unemployment went all the way up to 9%. The previous highest unemployment was in January of 2010 at 6%. Though this is a lot higher, we're one of the only counties in the Washington region that the unemployment rate did not go above 10%. Fairfax, it went up to 10.2, DC, it went up to 11.1. What we can see here in August 2020 is we are recovering quickly. We are seeing a lot of the job loss was temporary, but also a lot of it was not, which we're gonna get into that in just a second. So the latest unemployment numbers that I pulled this morning, available at the county level, are for August 2020, and it shows us at about 6.8%. So still higher than it ever was in the recession, but pretty rapid recovery from where we were a few months ago. And then looking at job loss. So this is a tricky one because of the way that jobs are calculated. We don't actually have county level data available yet, but we do have what's referred to as metropolitan subdivision data available, which combines Montgomery and Frederick counties. And since Montgomery County's economy is more than 4 times the size of Frederick County's economy, this is a pretty good barometer of trends in Montgomery. And what you see here is that we, compared to August of 2019, we still have about 32,000 fewer jobs. And then I'm going to get into industry breakdown on the next slide. But what I do want to say is if you look at the change over time, a lot of jobs have been recovered. The worst year-over-year job losses were in April and May, and we've regained a lot since, but we still have a long way to go. Looking at industries, you can see that actually professional, scientific, and technical services, which include our thriving life sciences industry, includes federal contracting, includes a lot of white-collar professional services, A lot of those jobs have recovered, and even started to grow. We have more of those jobs in August 2020 than we did in 2019, which, as you can see, that's really our only large industry sector where that's true. Accommodation and food services, looking at restaurants, hotels, that sort of thing. A lot of job losses concentrated there. Same with business services, if you're thinking about janitorial, landscaping, security detail. A lot of people aren't in offices, so there's less demand for those services. So these are the kinds of jobs. So this is where we're really seeing uneven recovery, especially because a lot of these industries are also have higher concentrations of lower income jobs. So residents who were already vulnerable are in even a more vulnerable position, and their jobs haven't recovered as quickly. Moving on to the next slide, one to touch on biohealth, which Marty can really talk about a lot more, as well as some of our other partners. Billions of Operation Warp Speed funding for the COVID vaccine have been invested into companies right here in Montgomery County. The only counties that might be beating us are in Boston or San Francisco. We are one of the nation's leaders in terms of receiving federal funds for that. Additionally, a lot of our companies have rapidly grown in valuation. Novavax went from being a company worth about $700 million to being worth over $9 billion in the span of about 10 months. So you see a lot of growth there. There's a lot of venture capital activity. In 2019, we went from the 5th biggest biohealth market to the 4th largest biohealth market, behind only behind Boston, San Francisco, and San Diego. So these are like really great things. Also, during COVID, we've had no less than 3 biohealth companies from outside the region set up either a North America headquarters or a really substantial presence here. Very impressive that we can still do that in the midst of an unprecedented pandemic in our lifetime. As we've pointed out, this is not experienced evenly by all. This is a map that was produced with dollar data by Montgomery County Office of Legislative Oversight, showing the geographic distribution of unemployment insurance claims. And as you can see, a lot of it's really concentrated in accommodations and food services and healthcare. Now, life sciences is really developing, pharmaceuticals and therapeutics and such, whereas healthcare is really about delivering those to the patient. And a lot of those job losses are more concentrated in dentist offices, in independent physicians' offices, not so much in hospitals. And you can see the geographic distribution of unemployment insurance really reinforces a lot of the other disparities you see. I assembled a few maps, though honestly, there's dozens of maps I could have put here. The map on the left is average household income by census tract. The darker the color, the higher income, the lighter the color, the lower income. In the middle, I have distribution of population by predominant racial group. And then on the far right, I have a map of change in household income of inflation adjusted from 1990 to 2016. And as you can see, a lot of the same patterns are reinforced over and over again, with higher incomes concentrated inside the Beltway and towards the western side of the county, which overlays with jobs, food insecurity, all of that. So these are just really important things to realize. As I once heard the director of the DC Policy Center say, COVID didn't necessarily change anything. It just amplified a lot of disparities that already existed. And with that, I will conclude my time, and so we can move on to the next. If you'd like more data and insights, Brandon at thinkmoco.com. Thank you so much, Ben and Delegate Chi.
Great. Thank you, Brandon. Let me turn it now over to, is it Marty or Gigi who's going to go next?
Ben, I think I was going to go next, just a few minutes. So, so first of all, thank you everyone for for allowing us this opportunity. I know we have another opportunity in November, which I will have more time and an opportunity to talk about tech and life sciences in the region. So I'm going to keep it very high level and very brief this morning. First of all, Brandon presented a lot of great data in the life science and technology sectors within Montgomery County, within Maryland. What we're seeing is a lot of companies that have excelled for obvious reason in response to COVID-19, but we're also seeing a number of companies that are struggling. When the pandemic first hit, we formed what we've called the Maryland COVID Coalition. And the Maryland COVID Coalition was made up of all of the companies, mostly life science companies, that were pivoting and responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. And if you recall early on, the issues that the companies faced were access to personal protective equipment, numbers of tests that were available, sampling kits for testing. Those problems have changed, but they've continued. So PPE is not as much of a problem as it used to be. Number of sampling kits is not the problem that it used to be. But I was on a call just this morning, and now in the testing sector, what we're seeing is in order to perform COVID-19 testing, the automated equipment requires these very small plastic pipette tips that are now in very short supply. And so we're looking for sources and resources to find those kinds of things. And the coalition came together to identify these challenges as we go forward and then work together to help resolve them. So the collaboration in Maryland and Montgomery County in this response has been like nothing I've seen before. It's been amazing. It's been tremendous to be a part of it. But at the same time, we have companies that have supply chain issues, have pipeline issues because their salespeople can't make face-to-face sales calls, and they haven't quite figured out how to make the transition from outside sales, in-person sales, to inside telephone and digital sales. And so we formed the Business Continuity Task Force, which relies on a resource that we built in our venture mentoring service of 130 executives that have come together to volunteer their time and resources to mentor companies. Many of them have led or guided companies through past economic recessions. And so through that group, we're reaching out, we're identifying these companies that are challenging and having these kinds of issues, and pairing them with a mentor that can help them either make the connections that they need or help guide them with their strategy, help them figure out where to go from here. Other issues that we're seeing, it's interesting. So on the one hand, we've seen this tremendous influx of capital. The Operation Warp Speed funding, as Brandon pointed out, has been over $3 billion. And I actually think it might be beyond what some of the other clusters like Boston and San Francisco have received. And then the venture capital and other investment on top of that has been another $1 billion or more. So it's been significant from one perspective, but on the other side, on the flip side, we're seeing, just like in past economic recessions, we're seeing investors become more risk averse. They're investing in smaller tranches. They're being more careful. And so the companies are having to get very, very good at raising capital and addressing the capital markets. And we're seeing challenges there as well. So I guess it's a two-sided coin. We're seeing a tremendous amount of growth and benefit. Brandon also pointed out our rankings with respect to, Genetic Engineering News does these rankings across the country. Currently they rank us number 4. And if you take a look at just our cell and gene therapy and our vaccine industries, I think you could make a very strong case that we're ranked number 1. If you look at the industries within the biotech industry. And I think the funding from Operation Warp Speed is a demonstration of that and the strength that we've built here. So the last thing that I'm going to touch on is workforce. So in the life science and tech sectors, we've seen the companies that have excelled through this have basically taken up the slack with respect to jobs. So we've seen some growth in jobs as a result of the companies that have excelled. On the workforce front, workforce continues to be a challenge. We've seen dramatic needs in biomanufacturing, for vaccine manufacturing, in other areas. So we're seeing a lot of workforce development needed there. Interestingly enough, we're seeing what I would call workforce development fatigue by many of these companies. They're telling us that, again, on a call just this morning, I was told that there's been a lot of motion, but not a lot of movement with respect to workforce development in both tech and life sciences. And so I think overall, the picture is better than certainly the hospitality restaurant industries. We are seeing some challenges with the industry that we're working on, and I'll be able to get into much greater detail. We'll have some panel members, some companies that will be able to talk to you about what they've been experiencing as well when we get back together again in November. So thank you.
Gigi, would you like to start?
All right, great. Well, let me start by saying thank you so much for the opportunity to be here this morning. Special thank you to the new Economic Development Committee Chair, Delegate Lily Chee, for inviting all of us. We're appreciating this opportunity very much. And I've been working with Lily for a very long time, before we were doing what we're doing today. So this is especially gratifying. I also want to acknowledge, before we get too far, the Chamber's Vice President of Government Relations, Tricia Swanson, who was instrumental in building and working with all of us today to get us on board and ready to go, and who works with every member of our delegation. So I know Tricia's on this call as well, and I want to thank her for that. And I want to thank the members of the delegation who came today and who are here with my colleagues, Ben and Marty and Carmen. And I thank you all for your continuing partnership. I have to say, I really appreciate the data that Brandon presented, because it supports what we've been talking about also at the Chamber, which is that where we are right now is kind of a tale of two economies. And I think his data very much supported what we've been speaking about quite a bit with our own members and with other business leaders. I'm going to be brief. We've got two incredible Chamber members here to discuss their more specific business needs. And I think, also will highlight the tale of two economies piece. Looking back over the last 7 months, our Chamber's been advocating at the local and the state, and I think you all know we advocate at the federal level as well on behalf of our members. We've hosted many webinars on best practices and how to navigate in this new COVID-19 world. Through these seminars and in advocating for our members, two big general themes really emerge: specific supports for small businesses and supporting the workforce, which cuts across all businesses, small, medium, and large businesses. In looking at specific support for small businesses, there are a couple of main issues to highlight today. Liability. As the private sector contributes to COVID-19 response, it faces liability challenges. As a result, private companies will require protection from unreasonable exposure to some of these liabilities. As the crisis subsides, many Maryland businesses will require liability protection to resume commerce without fear of lawsuits. So this is a real issue for a lot of our small companies. Another issue is unemployment assessment percentage, that topic. Every effort should be made by the state to replenish the funds taken from the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund as a result of COVID-19 pandemic without raising the rates of premiums for employers. It would be unfair to punish them for a situation that was forced on them by forcing businesses to close. It's not something anybody wanted to do. And so it would be very unfair for them to be penalized for that. Related to that concern, unemployment insurance claims made by an employee during the COVID-19 pandemic should not be counted toward an employer's experience rating. So, it's kind of an in the weeds thing, but it's a big bunch of weeds and they're pretty tall. So pretty significant for small businesses. Economic sustainability is the other issue, and that's the economic impact of COVID-19, which everybody knows this is unprecedented. It's not unique to us. And we may be better positioned than most, but the implications are going to continue to require an extraordinary response by all of you. Maryland's policymakers, should seek and implement measures intended to support businesses financially, especially as they work to overcome and rebuild from the pandemic. This might include credits, incentives, and other favorable tax treatment. But this is something that we hope will be uppermost in your mind, is to find ways to help them. Turning to the other issues, support for our workforce, childcare and virtual learning. Oh my goodness, that's turned the world upside down. A top concern we're hearing from our members about supporting their employees is balancing working from home and supporting their children in a virtual learning setting. Gee, I wish I could see all of you so you could raise your hands if this is affecting your worlds, because I'm going to bet it is, knowing many of you. This is not news to anybody. Yeah, there's Carell's hand, and I know Jared's hand should be going up. I don't see him, but I'm going to bet a lot of you have that. Anyhow, I think this issue, used to be nobody ever talked about childcare issue. We need to talk about it because it needs some help, and it's a huge problem every day, every hour of every day. And the people that provide childcare need help, and the people that need it need help. And businesses can't function without the proper supports and protocols and understanding about what they're up against in this. So, and that it's pretty important to get accessibility to reliable and high-speed broadband internet. So that's a huge workforce issue. People think of it one way, but we have all realized that if you can't get on your laptop today, or every day, you can't do your job. Not everybody has the luxury of working from home, but even if you don't, your children who are studying from home and being educated from home have this as an issue. So this becomes a huge employment issue, huge workforce issue. I think it's a social equity issue, which is a whole big topic all by itself. So we're raising this because we have an issue even in Montgomery County. We've got huge pockets of the county where employers, employees, and students can't access reliable broadband. We're falling behind on this. I think as a state we're in trouble, but even the county is way behind here. It's kind of embarrassing. Anyhow, as we look towards many more months of working from home, it looks like, we've got to really do something to ensure that everyone has access to these essential services. So with that, I'm going to stop. And I'm excited to introduce to you two great members of the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce who are well known to all of you and who will share their insights and recommendations to you. They are Julie Varadi of Denizens and Mickey Papillon of Federal Realty. They both have been very active in advocacy and bring tremendous subject matter expertise and experience on the impact that this global pandemic is having on our retail, our restaurant, and our hospitality businesses here in our community. I'm going to, therefore, take the pleasure of first introducing Julie Varadi. Take it away, Julie.
Julie, could I interject for a second? And I apologize earlier. I forgot to introduce my D15 buddy, my colleague, Delegate David Fraser Hidalgo, who just came back. So thank you for joining us too. And thank you, Marty, for your wonderful presentation as well as Gigi's. So Julie, thank you for taking the time. And we are very sorry for what happened to your restaurant over the weekend.
Thank you. And thanks for having me here today. I'm seriously very grateful to be able to speak directly to you guys about very specific ways that not just you guys as the delegation for the county, but I urge you to reach out to your colleagues across the whole state to help us. We need to take action this year to support small businesses. So I wrote down 5 things that I think would really be helpful. 2 of them, Gigi has already mentioned, one of them being making sure that there's liability protection for small businesses as they reopen. The second is the unemployment insurance rates. Prior to COVID hitting, we had 45 employees. We were forced to shut down by the state for very legitimate and good reasons. Public health has to be our number one priority. But we ended up having to lay people off, and we've been able to bring some folks back. But at this point, we went from 45, we now have 32 employees. And it's not because we were trending in that direction. In fact, we were hitting all of our projections and going above them in March, and then COVID hit and the year has gone completely upside down. So I would please implore you, do not punish small businesses that have been forced to close because of this pandemic that ended up having to lay people off. To put it in perspective, prior to COVID, we were getting a 0% charge against our account for unemployment insurance, and our annual fee was a few $100s. I think it was maybe like $700. We've been sent letters since COVID hit where we've had to lay people off, where our account is being charged $20,000. So I have no idea what those rates are going to be if we end up having to pay for those going into the future, especially since, again, we didn't lay people off because we needed to, other than the fact that COVID hit. The other really, really important thing, and this is very specific to, I would say, the bar, restaurant, hospitality, alcohol manufacturer sector. So breweries, wineries, distilleries, which again, I remind you guys are not just retailers and hospitality, but also manufacturers in the state. All of the alcohol regulations that have been relaxed during COVID to allow us to have different revenue streams. So to go alcohol, direct to consumer home delivery alcohol, these need to be made permanent. I can tell you right now, month to month, having the ability to directly deliver beer to our customers has been the difference between deciding we're going to close our doors and walk away to, okay, we can make it through next month. So, and that's just us. And I can promise you that that is the case for every other retailer, bar, restaurant, manufacturer that is dealing with this. So please make sure that those regulations are made permanent. The fourth thing that I would say, and this is just a generalization, in any way that you can look up and down programs across the state where small businesses are required to pay fees, whether it's their annual business license, et cetera, either reduce or eliminate them for at least the next year. Anywhere that you can look that will stop cash from being taken out of small business bank accounts right now, please take those actions. And again, I'm not saying this is a permanent thing. This is just as we get through COVID in the next year or two. The second thing is to create more programs, whether they're grants or very, very good terms in terms of low interest financing, long repayment terms for loans for small businesses as well. Really, the thing is we need cash to not be leaving our bank account, and we need cash to be infused into our bank accounts. Cash is going to be the key thing for businesses getting through the winter. And I can tell you there are programs that the county has done. And, Ben, thank you very much for creating the $5,000 grant for restaurants and retailers. Put my application in yesterday. So, but just to put it in perspective, $5,000 is very helpful. And I'm hoping that we're able to qualify and get those monies. To date, we have not received a single penny from the state of Maryland or from Montgomery County in any type of relief whatsoever. And we've applied for everything. But our monthly rent in Silver Spring is over $20,000 a month. So $5,000, yes, it's helpful, but I just want to make sure you guys see those like very hard specific numbers there when you're thinking about programs that are being created. They need to be bigger. They need to be bolder. They need to be very aggressive, because if we allow small businesses to close their doors permanently, the entire tax base is going to be completely eradicated, and you're going to have millions more people that are going to need government assistance, and you have no ability to raise tax funds to pay for that. So thank you for listening to me. I'm happy to be a part of the Q&A at the end. I obviously have other opinions, but I'll end there. And again, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys taking the time to talk about this important topic.
Thank you so much, Julie. All right. Mickey, would you like to follow?
Yes, thank you, Delegate Chief, for having us today. And I first want to echo just a few things that Julie said. The specific instances of support that we've received, especially on the alcohol side from our sector, on the property owner landlord side, that we've been able to then pass on and assist our businesses in doing, have been incredibly helpful. I'll talk about a couple of those in a minute, but also the grants that have been available need to continue. Obviously, we are very much in support of ensuring that we can help our businesses do whatever we can. So I want to provide two.
Excuse me, Mickey, could you just take a moment to introduce yourself and your line of business so
Sure.
that we understand, the angle
Yep.
from which you are discussing this project?
Indeed, yeah. So Mickey Paplon, Vice President and Regional General Manager for Federal Realty. I handle both the Pike and Rose development and Bethesda Row in Montgomery County for our company. So I'm going to give two perspectives here. One is on the side of our tenants, our retailers, our restaurants, and our office tenants, and then the other is from the side of the property owner. So when COVID was first, upon us back in March, we spent quite a bit of time working with our retailers to figure out what they could and couldn't do and what our restaurants could and couldn't do. And that was everything from instituting curbside pickups immediately the weekend that things started to shut down. March 14th, we rolled out our curbside pickup programs and then worked with Montgomery County's ABS to also allow for relaxing of some of the alcohol regulations that were then ultimately adopted the week later. If you're a retailer in this county, your best case probably doing about 75% of what you were doing before. Most are probably around 50%. And that problem is exacerbated by the issues of if you had inventory and that was something that was sitting on your shelves back in March, you weren't able to sell it until June. That inventory was stale at that point, so you had to take deep discounts on it to move it. That crunched your margins, and basically you were moving into the summer and fall season already feeling pretty far behind. If you're a restaurant, some have been able to figure it out. Some have, in fact, done better than they were doing pre-COVID. These are far and away the exceptions. I talk to every single one of our businesses on a regular basis. And one of the things that I'm hearing is pivoting has been key to making things work. Julie mentioned curbside. Julie mentioned direct to home delivery to consumers. These are things that we never would have considered pre-COVID, and now they are essential to ensuring that these businesses are able to move forward. So we've got some of our restaurants that have been able to really do what they needed to do to make that pivot and make it work, and others that are still struggling because they haven't been able to be as flexible as they needed to. Now, one of the other things that I've got the benefit of having and seeing are these really diverse communities that have both places for people to come and play or enjoy themselves with restaurants and retail, but also to live and work. And on the office side, some of our businesses have brought people back. We've had essential businesses that have had people in the spaces working throughout the entirety of the pandemic. That's, again, not the norm, though. And many of our businesses are saying it's going to be spring or maybe even next summer before they bring people back into their spaces. And I'll tell you right now, I've got a beautiful new office building, 909 Rose, right outside my office here. Now is a very bad time to be trying to lease up an office building. And so as we are moving into the next 6 months of uncertainty, one of the things that that we're really looking for is any specific help and any proposals that come about. I can tell you at this point, I don't have any real asks of it, but I know as we move into a period from where I'll say the last 3 months have been where we've all started to feel, I don't want to say comfortable, but more comfortable than the 3 months prior to it. I think we're going to regress in some of those feelings. And as a property owner, obviously it's much less sexy for us to be, in the world of dealing with this kind of stuff right now. But we've got tax assessments to cover. We've got utility bills to cover. We've got mortgage payments that we have to be made. And if we can't take care of these things and we can't get the assistance that we need, we can't help our tenants. And I can tell you that is something that I personally am doing. I'm working more hours now to bring in less money than I ever have. And one of the reasons we want to do that is because we believe in the businesses that we've brought into our properties, and the projects that we've built have to continue after the pandemic. And in order to do that, we have to help them out. And those impacts go deep. As was mentioned, we've got impacts to all of our services, whether it's the parking and valet teams. We've had countless employees that have been laid off because of the need to it, because we haven't had as many people coming. Obviously, we're not doing as much work on the landscaping, engineering, or security businesses because we don't have as many people coming and ultimately don't have the same needs there. So the quasi-normal that we've had over the last 3 months, or at least I've started to kind of feel, is really, I think, going to start to be, it's going to start to fade. And I'm concerned about this increased anxiety over the next 6 months. And I am, again, going head back down here as we enter into the winter months to really do what we can to help. So I just ask for your assistance in helping us get there.
Thank you very much, Mickey. Next, we have Carmen Lawson, President of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, who is also a tech business owner, as well as a board member of the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. I just jumped in. Ben, do you want to chime in before Carmen start?
No, we're very pleased to have Carmen help lead us within MCDC, and she can bring a unique perspective from being a small business owner, as you mentioned, as well as the president of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Lily, and thank you, Ben. I am very pleased that we're able to come here and talk to you today. The situation of, I don't need to tell you or repeat what Gigi said. She covered an awful lot of what's going on in the business community. From the perspective of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, what we are looking at is roughly a little over 3,000 employers, Hispanic business owners that are employers in this area, that are, many of which are in industries that are going to be really are already very hard hit. We look at some of the things that are happening. We saw some of the statistics earlier that were dated August 2020. And it showed like well, maybe it isn't too bad in some areas, but I want to remind you that many of the businesses took out PPP loans that were able to help them through some period of time. Those who took out those PPP loans that thought it was only going to cover them for July and August didn't have the benefit of extending that loan or getting another one to cover the rest of the time. So the numbers I anticipate are going to be a little bit different when we look at it, maybe for what happened in October, what happened in December or January. So we are a little bit wary about what's going on. How can we ask for help? Well, some of the obvious things is, can we get some additional assistance? And what Julie mentioned, maybe take away some of the fees that small businesses have to pay, that any little bit helps. But here are the three areas that businesses, and as a business owner myself with employees, I can see what are the expensive things that we have to deal with. We have to, and of course, small businesses, a lot of times it's families that have opened up businesses and have people from their family working in it. So we're talking about issues that can be helped on the state level and some that need to be helped from the federal level. And so we need to look at this. Many people we have a reprieve on student loan repayment until the end of the year. We don't know what's going to happen after that. Employers are still having to pay, many of which covered healthcare costs, or at least partially healthcare costs that are still increasing. And we still have issues with having to cover healthcare or telling employees, well, look, now you can cover your own. We're not covering this anymore. But I think that the biggest, most prevalent issue on businesses are those who cannot pay for their leases or can only pay some of their leases, and landlords who haven't gotten it yet, that maybe it's to their benefit to negotiate some lower lease or some deferral or things like that. But leases lease defaults that result in lawsuits don't really help. We don't think anybody. So I don't know what can be done about that, but I know that property owners need to pay mortgages, but we can't have a lot of businesses going out of business and then holding on to these leases that a lot of small businesses have to co-sign personally too. So I think that's a big thing that we need some help in. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I do know that that's a problem. The other part that I think would be very important, and I have this one and one more, broadband, access to broadband and at decent speeds, because right now we have everybody competing for the internet, but also installing a stronger infrastructure for both broadband and 5G cellular, because as Gigi said, we're falling behind. I think it's important that we have a strong infrastructure, because the future is going to be being able to work and communicate remotely, promptly, and it's not just voice. Somebody said, oh, you just want movies, right? But I think now they see the reality of it. It's not just that people want movies. They want to do business and transact with videos and images and things like that, that it becomes increasingly important, as well as monitoring for security. Like when you're implementing Internet of Things or monitoring infrastructure and facilities, you do need better communication capabilities. So I'm going to ask you to really take a look at that and what Maryland can do to strengthen that infrastructure and invest in that infrastructure. And then one last thing I'm going to talk about is there's a bigger need to support reopening other than, what exists right now is okay, but it's not going to be sufficient. There's bigger need than just the PPEs and the protective devices and hand lotion and things like that. I think the HVAC systems in public areas, as well as in private areas, need to be upgraded to have UVC lighting to decontaminate the air, or to be rethinking about how you have better air circulation and filtration and that sort of thing that is that kills the virus as air circulates, because that's what's holding us back from going into the restaurant and eating, or going into the store, or going into the theater. So suddenly there's a big need to invest in better HVAC systems at a time when there's less money to invest. So I think help with having a strategy for, at least in the public venues, of having ventilation that maybe why don't we look at this UVC lighting, because it's been used in New York and New Jersey, in other areas where they've successfully shown decontamination using. And then there are now have come up with technologies that can be used even during the daytime when there's human trafficking with the what's called the fast UVC, or the far UVC, I guess it's called. But anyhow, those are the things that I'm talking about. I don't, the sad stories for businesses. I don't need to tell you that, but I do want you to look at these things that we talked about. Make sure that we don't have people being sued personally for the leases they couldn't complete, and make sure that we have enough money to continue funding healthcare in some kind of way, and then the protection with the HVAC and air systems. Again, anything you can do to help us out. I think it's not going to look better right now. It's going to look worse. But I think while grants are great, I think investing in infrastructure that's going to help us in the future is where we want to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I have learned so much, and I hope all my colleagues have learned a lot from all your insights and your sharing of experiences. I want to open up the floor for some questions for my colleagues and committee members to ask. I will start with my Vice Chair, Delegate Solomon, if you have any comments or questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's great to be working with you, and thank you for everybody for being here. I just wanted to thank everybody for their comments. Like the chair, I found it really helpful. I have a whole page of notes that I've taken, and I think we have a lot to think about. Gigi, I really appreciate you mentioning childcare. I know many of us in the hearing have spent a lot of time this summer working on it, frankly, banging our heads against the wall with some folks in the administration and trying to get it upgraded. And it's something that we're going to continue to focus on when we get back in January. Dr. Rosendahl, I did just have a quick question for you, because I know the workforce development issue is something that we've been talking a lot about, and I'm cognizant of your point that there's been the feeling of motion, but not, I think, development is how you put it, and in being cognizant of knowing how long sometimes those things take to get up and running. I was wondering if you could just touch on sort of where we might be able to step in. We obviously want to make sure that USG is protected in potential cuts, and that those programs are there appropriately. But is there anything in specific, and we can also follow up offline, to talk more about it. But would just be curious to get your thoughts to expand more on that piece of your comments.
Sure. First, I feel like I should clarify. Well, I am a microbiologist and an engineer. I'm not a doctor, so I think I should make that clarification. So thank you for the question. And the comment that I made, or actually the comment that I quoted from what I heard this morning, was a lot of motion and not a lot of movement. And I think that comes from there's a lot of programs that have cropped up because it's clearly an issue. Workforce development in STEM, in technology and life sciences is clearly an issue. We need more young people coming up in the STEM fields and taking these jobs. And it's also an issue with respect to diversity, inclusivity, and equity. And so we need focus there as well. I think your point about USG. USG is a tremendous source of that workforce because that campus is designed to assist older college students, people that want to come back and are looking for a different career, want to change careers, people that like myself. When I went through college, I put myself through college, so I had to work while I was going to college. It's a tremendous campus for developing and driving workforce, and we need to make sure that we continue to fund it and we continue to work with them to build that workforce. Our community colleges, Montgomery College is another source of workforce. The jobs that are in demand right now aren't the jobs that require very high degrees. They don't require PhDs and masters. These are mid-level, mid-management, really good, exciting jobs that have good salaries. But you can get there with sometimes a 2-year degree, certainly with a 4-year degree, and so it's great opportunities, and we just need some focus. We need to make sure that those colleges and universities are supported and backed to help us with the training and the development, and then we need to put in place the apprenticeship programs and expand I shouldn't say put in place because they exist. Expand and support the apprenticeship and internship programs that are out there, so we can continue to build and drive that. And certainly I'd be happy to have this conversation in greater depth offline.
And if I could add to Marty's statement, Delegate Solomon, Chairwoman Chi has created a 2-part briefing. And so next month we'll be gathering again and we can talk a little bit more in specificity about the innovation-led economy for Montgomery County and for Maryland. And workforce development is certainly going to be a key component of make sure that we have the talent pipeline in order to ensure our preeminence in our economy. Regarding USG, and we can talk a little more about this next month as well. As you know, there is a transition between Stu Edelman and then Ann Kadamian just started this week. And so there is an engaged effort with Marty now as a member of the USG Board of Advisors to see about how USG can evolve to a 2.0. That would include greater responsibilities from an academic institution perspective and also potentially a research and a graduate student perspective as well. But we can save that conversation for next week, or next month rather.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Marty. I just wanted to say, Julie, thank you for answering those questions in the chat. I think a lot of us have a lot of ideas, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have several members who asked an opportunity to ask questions. I'm going to start with my committee member, Delegate Resnick, followed by Delegate Lutke, and then Senator Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I think, my question has to do with a follow-up to a lot of the comments were made by Gigi and Ben and others. Is that a lot of the difficulty that we are facing as a result of COVID are things that are potentially going to extend beyond COVID. Gigi mentioned issues like childcare and the fact that, we're telecommuting and people are no longer able to have the same job, the lower pay, lower skill jobs like cleaning crews and other things at office buildings because people aren't using office buildings anymore. From my own personal experience working in the private sector, that's going to continue. We're already having conversations about what does this look like post-COVID, and do we continue teleworking or teleworking part-time, and what that means for everything from cleaning crews and security staff to transportation and transit, to what do office buildings look like, and needing infrastructure for telecommunications at home because you're sucking broadband on 10 different devices now and everybody needs access. what do we need to do? And I understand that the concerns right now that were raised by Julie and by Mickey and others are the concerns raised for right now are important, not just for our businesses, but for our residents as well. But how do we start to plan for what comes next when the world has officially changed the way we are going to be living our lives from now on? We're not going to need to go into the office as much anymore because we realize that the meeting could be on Zoom and the Zoom call could be a phone call and the phone call could have been an email. And what that means for not just working folks, but everybody else as well. And so I want to get some ideas from all of you about what do we need to do to start planning for that moving forward. Gigi, I'll start with you or Ben.
I wasn't sure if that was a sort of a.
It was a
broad
general
question.
one, but for whatever on my Zoom, you're directly under me, so I just.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I think doing what we're doing today is a huge step in that direction because you're hearing from our companies, employers. I mean, Carmen has a company. She represents the Hispanic Chamber, but she's a businesswoman. And you're hearing from Julie Verratti, and you're hearing from Mickey Papillon, who not only has, his company, but all those other companies that he works with. And I think it really starts with, well, what are they seeing and what are they hearing from, what are they experiencing? And how are they planning for recovery? Because we're in this weird period where, all right, oh dear, we're gonna be at this until June of next year or next fall, maybe. I mean, a year from now, we could just be climbing out of this. What does that mean for people? And then how do they invest differently? There are huge issues around leases and companies and whether or not they can manage that. And there are huge issues around childcare, but and we do need your help to start laying the groundwork. The thing about legislation is it doesn't flip a switch overnight, so it really does take some planning. But I think you're making the right, this is the first step in listening to what are people really dealing with and what were they forced to do that they would never have done. None of these companies wanted to lay off all these people. And yet our rules are in place, assuming that, that they should be punished for doing that. Like there's a cost to cutting back, but so there are things that you need to do now to right the ship on that. And the question is what happens long run? I will say that I do think that we're human, as human beings, we want to be together. I think that's why we're having upticks in COVID and all that across the country, is that we're social beings. And, office space as we knew it before, or the frequency of its use and all of that, I think is going to evolve. I'm not sure, though, that the need to congregate went away. I heard a great piece on NPR last week when I was in the car, and it was all about, if bars aren't open, can great technology break through? Raise your hand if you heard that great conversation. It was unbelievable. And so the joke was, if you take alcohol out of the equation, can we have no more technological advancement? I don't think it was about the alcohol, but I do think it was about getting people together. Maybe it was a little of each from column A and column B. And maybe Marty could speak to that some more. But, getting people, when they congregate, they do come up with things. So I think that spaces aren't going to stop being used. I think they're going to change. I think they're going to evolve. I think they were in the process of doing that. So I wouldn't quite say rest in peace. No, I wouldn't put an RIP sign out quite yet, because I think people need to congregate. Yeah, you can do a lot on Zoom calls, but I'm hearing from people that they really want to be together. So at some point, we're going to navigate out of this. The thing I'm concerned about is that the short term matters, because where are our small businesses going to be if we don't deal with the short term? They don't have the luxury. I don't think that they have the luxury of waiting for a year for things to sort out. Their rental payments are an issue. Many landlords are working things out with people. I know Mickey is. I know other people are. Not everybody is. Not everybody's a good guy. But I think there's a lot of urgency right now because it's important to look at the long run, and that's what legislators should do. But there've got to be some things done right now, because we're 7 months in. This isn't month one, it's 7 months in, and people are in big trouble. one of the statistics of thousands of businesses going under. We don't want thousands more. So you've got to balance, and this is hard, but I think this really falls to you. Since you're asking the question is what do you do in the short term, to make sure that our companies survive so that they're there for that long term. And I really think we almost have to think in two different troughs of action. What can the legislature do when it reconvenes immediately to relieve some of the stresses? And then, how do you get better access to broadband? I do believe these are social equity questions too. I think they're gender equity questions, by the way, but I guess I won't go down that path today. But right now, I think there's a huge equity issue around that of who's getting access. And we're not even beginning to deal with the fact that there's a huge segment of our economy that doesn't have the luxury of working from home, the service economy that we've only touched on. I think it's hard, but I think that look at the brain power on this delegation. If there's anybody I could expect that could come up with, what do we need to do in the immediate term and what do we need to do in the long term, it would be the group of people I'm looking at right now.
Thank you, Gigi. I think in the interest of time, we need to move on to next questions. I would like to not cut off the discussion because it's such a critical subject and there's a tremendous amount of interest from legislators. We also have a very good representation. So if you guys could stay around for a few more minutes. So we have a few more legislators who would like to ask questions. Thank you very much. I would like to turn to Delegate Eric Luedtke to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to everyone for your briefing today. And perhaps to Delegate Chi's point about time, perhaps this is something better to follow up on. But I wanted to note that, and I think all of you are aware of this, that at the same time that businesses are struggling, the government is having revenue issues as well. And part of our uncertainty right now is not knowing whether we're going to get additional stimulus out of the federal government. Obviously, that's going to play a huge role in anything we can do on a financial level to support small businesses. But one thing that would be very helpful to us, given that multiple folks mentioned, fees and sort of smaller things like that affect businesses, is if we could get specific examples, proposals, prioritization of those types of fees. What will have the biggest impact, right? And for us to be thinking about, impact in specific industries, right? So given that accommodations and food service is getting hit harder, would cuts in fees for alcohol licenses have a bigger impact than cuts in the general small business filing fee? So that's maybe a follow-up thing. I'd love to hear more, and I'm sure my colleagues would as well.
So maybe this is something you don't necessarily have to answer unless someone has ready answers, but otherwise we would welcome some homework on your part to let us know. Oh, Julie, please respond. Thank you.
Well, so our annual licensing fees on the state level as an alcohol manufacturer are $500. Our liquor licenses in Montgomery County are $3,000 a year. And we have a PG location as well, and that's about $3,000 a year.
Are they equally important to you?
Is that a trick question?
It's not. We have to think about these things. And these things have real implications, which way we go, right? If we can't do everything, is there a priority? Well, that's what Eric is asking.
Yeah, I mean, for us, again, I'm not trying to be parochial about it, but obviously I own an alcohol manufacturing business. So I would love for those fees to be either eradicated for the next year or two or drastically reduced. We're forced to be at 50% revenue right now just because we're at 50% capacity. So our liquor license should not be 100%. I think it should be at least at 50, if not less than that. So that's just one example.
That's a good point. Thank you. All right, Senator Lee.
Thank you, Chairman Chi, and congratulations, Chairman Chi, on your new chairmanship and leadership. I know you're well qualified to do this. You had a track record, impressive track record working on these issues. And I also like to congratulate Ben Wu. Thank you so much for wanting to do this, to head up and be at the helm of the leadership of the corporation. I know you've worked as a Deputy Secretary of Commerce, but you also work with the state, and now you're bringing it to our county, so we're very grateful. And also thank you for being my constituent too. I have a question probably for Brandon and Martin. about a particular sector. But first of all, I'd like to also thank everyone else, Gigi and Julie and Carmen and Nikki, for your excellent presentations. I think you've identified some of the enormous challenges that businesses, particularly small businesses and businesses of color, have in dealing with this horrible pandemic, and how it's wreaked havoc on your business, because we're now in a new norm. So I think we will probably have to follow up and work with you how we can help you with the county resolve some of these issues. This is for Brandon and Martin. How much of the workforce is the life sciences and cybersecurity, especially in light of the fact now everyone's trying to race for a vaccine, and now that a lot of businesses and a lot of individuals are now operating their business and also doing telework, cybersecurity has become very important. And also, I think Carmen raised something about broadband too. So what is the corporation doing to, partner with maybe the federal government and your private sector stakeholders to get things like, or giving assistance, like helping them find financing, just at least stay in business so they can maintain their workforce, get through their critical clinical trials, protect their intellectual properties, and also just be able to come up with that vaccine. And I know the small businesses particularly need more assistance than the big ones, because they're the kind of like the bedrock of that business. So I know what you've all pointed out is that we need to work more collaboratively with not just you all, but also with our county partners, but also our federal partners. So are you now working with our federal partners to ensure that we get that critical funding and some of the other issues that you addressed? And again, I thank you so much for these excellent presentations.
Sure. I'll hand the more strategic and visionary questions to Marty and Ben, but I'll start by saying that as far as workforce goes, the life sciences industry in Montgomery County, and it's a little tricky to track, but it employs approximately 18 to 19,000 people in Montgomery County. They're not necessarily county residents. These are industries that do attract some commuters from DC, Prince George's, Frederick, even Northern Virginia. So there's about 18,000 life sciences jobs in the private sector. When you include NIH employees, that number comes closer to 45 or 50,000. So there are quite a number of jobs in this space. And I'll hand over the rest of the questions to Dr. Rosendale and Ben Wu.
So I guess the last part of your question there, Senator Lee, was what are we doing? How are we working with the federal government? And there's a number of things that are going on there. On the life sciences side, particularly with the funding, so we get involved. We have contacts with BARDA, which is the Division of the Health and Human Services that's managing most of the funding that's coming out with respect to the COVID vaccine development. They also have smaller funds for smaller companies that are developing diagnostics and others. So we work with them on a regular basis. We also work with our legislators at the federal level, mostly in combination with the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, BIO, and on the technology side with TECNA. We're a member of TECNA, and we're the bio affiliate for the state of Maryland. And so by being able to leverage the entirety of those organizations, we can work more effectively at the federal level. So we get involved with 5G deployment and all of those issues at the federal level as well through our membership and relationship to those other organizations. So there is quite a bit, and of course our members. It's not just about me meeting with senators. Our members get involved. Our members participate in when we go to Capitol Hill, when we're talking with legislators, so that we can deliver the message directly to what the members and the companies are experiencing.
Yeah, so Senator.
Yeah, I think that this is a real collaborative effort, and you've identified a lot of problems. So I think that we need, as a state, to work more closely with you. It seems that with the state, federal, and which is everybody, the business sector too. I think we have to be a unified front on this issue. And when you come down to Annapolis, please continue to work with us. And I thank you for what you've done with your advocacy. I think we need to do more, but we need to do more collaboratively, I think.
Well, Senator, your emphasis on partnership, I think, is critical. For the Economic Development Corporation, we are a public-private partnership, and we have made a priority to leverage our federal, state, and local resources in partnership in a number of different initiatives. You had mentioned cybersecurity. We're engaged with the NIST National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence to try to develop a local economic perspective for their efforts. We are also working very closely with TEDCO, especially since Troy Stovall has taken over as the new TEDCO chair. Or new president for TEDCO. And we're engaging in a number of partnerships also to try to support innovation and also to support small businesses. We administered for the county $1 million telecommunications assistance fund to try to provide funding and reimbursement for those small businesses that needed to stay connected in the pandemic crisis with their customers and also their employees and their clients in ways that they never had before. So we provided funding that allowed for them to be connected through the internet, through computer equipment and other equipment necessary for them to do that. So looking at things holistically from a federal, state, and local perspective is something that we've made a priority within the EDC because we need to leverage all of our assets. And the 5G, which has been mentioned several times today in our discussions, that's also going to be very critical. We're working with the county executive to try to move forward on a strategy for 5G. There is a reluctance in Montgomery County, mostly from a NIMBY perspective. Other counties have other issues, for example, fee issues impacting their adoption. But what we're seeing is that Fairfax County in Virginia, they have opened up their county for investment, and consequently, the industry is making those investments on their own to try to seize that market. And we can do the same if we had a more inviting structure. So we'll continue to work with the county executive to try to promote that within Montgomery County. But what you can do in the state to create and embrace an open 5G posture that will invite that kind of industry investment will also be very helpful.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, everyone. I'm not seeing any other questions, requests for questions. Do my members, committee members, Julie, you have a comment? Okay, Julie.
Just very quickly,
Yep.
I just want to emphasize that, please make sure you're working with the federal government. Rents and mortgages are really important, but it's really unfair, especially to the smallest landlords that exist, to force them to not collect rents when they're still having to be paying mortgages. So obviously the federal government is the one that regulates the banks. So working together on that would be very helpful. But also just remember that when small businesses existed prior to COVID, we made all these business decisions based on the certainty of the markets, the certainty of the area, and all of that completely went away. So we signed 10-year leases. We took out, multi-million-dollar loans to open our businesses and open our doors, personally guaranteeing all of them. All of those bills are still due. All of those commitments are still required to be met, and yet revenues have dropped by 50%. If we had known at the time that in 2020 this pandemic was going to hit, I can promise you we never would have signed the lease. We never would have signed the bank loan. I get up every single morning as a small business owner, and some days I feel optimistic and I'm feeling good about it, but I have days where I am just on the human side suffering from such crippling anxiety and fear that I'm going to lose everything I've ever worked for in my entire life. And I'm going to go personally bankrupt. And the business that I have built over the last 6 or 7 years is going to go away. And the 30 employees that work for me are going to lose their entire, livelihood as well. And the stress and the fear that weighs on me every day as a business owner, I just cannot emphasize enough to you. So please, whatever you can do to help and create some level of certainty, please do that. And I just wanted to share that message before we finish up the call. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Julie, for this heartfelt message. We need to listen. I do have one more colleague, Delegate Lopez has a question.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman Chi, which is fun to say. Earlier, Gigi mentioned looking at these problems through an equity lens, specifically gender equity. And you said like, okay, we'll talk about that later or we'll move on. But I just want to officially open the door and make that a formal ask. I realize we're at the end of the agenda, so maybe if there's just a few top lines that you think we should be mindful of from your experience that we might not know of.
Well, I think childcare and, the gender issues, pretty much collided at the same time. And what I'm really glad about is that I've lived long enough to see that people are speaking up about these issues now. Because when I was starting my career and my work life decades ago, you didn't discuss things like that. So I'm really happy that we can have open and honest conversations about equity issues. And I think what we're finding out and what employers are finding out is that a lot of home duties still fall a lot on women. Not all families are like that. I know that there are delegates here who've started families. I know they're equally in. So, but I think we just have to be mindful of that. And childcare is a huge piece of that. It's held women back for a long time. All kind of women doing all kinds of different things in the professional world. And I think that this pandemic and the disruption really made that even more obvious because it became inconvenient for all sorts of people who didn't want to think about it. So I think this is a delegation that's way more tuned in to that kind of thing. And I'm glad that the topic is no longer verboten, somehow taboo to discuss. Anyhow, I do still think it's a bigger topic, but I think equity in general, the economic disparity, the widening of the gap, all of that, the hollowing out of the middle class, none of that's helped women and it hasn't helped anybody else either.
Sure. Well, I look forward to following up with you and having further conversations. And I know there's other people on this Zoom
anytime
to participate.
Anytime, give me a call. I'll tell you the rest of what I really think.
Delegate Lopez, it's an important issue. Immediately after George Floyd's murder, Gigi, Carmen, and I, and Janice Freeman from the African American Chamber of Commerce, we all signed on to a joint statement condemning not just the murder, but also acknowledging the need for racial equity and having an inclusive economy. And so we try to make that a priority as we move forward. The county executive has been working with the county council to develop a series of economic recovery strategies. And as these strategies are being unveiled, we are making sure that there is an overlay of racial equity as well as to make sure that whatever economic recovery strategies we have also will be as inclusive as possible. And that means access to capital issues, it means workforce development issues, education. So this is a priority now that we all have to, I think, embrace as part of current events, but also because it's what's best for the economy, it's what's best for Montgomery County. And the fact that we're so diverse in Montgomery County allows us that unique position to be, I think, as forward-thinking as necessary, so that we can be a model not just for our region, but also for the state and potentially the nation as well.
Thank you. Well, we initially discussed having just a 1-hour discussion. Look where we are now. And we could go on for a while. This is such a critical and important and a timely discussion. I'm very glad we are having this meeting. This is just the beginning of our understanding of COVID's impact and how legislature, especially the state level, can be more proactive in working with our community and our business community. And I would say, well, in the past, the pre-pandemic, there was demarcation between work and the community, or work and the personal life. Now the line is so blurred. And what that means is helping business community in many ways is just helping people live their lives and get back on track with their lives. So it's even more important and urgent that as government, while we cannot do everything, especially in the short term, to help the business community, at least what we can do is to adopt a deeper sense of sensitivity in business regulation, in working with our business communities, knowing that everybody's hurting and doing their best to hold the communities together. So I want to thank all of my colleagues for their great work and leadership in different ways in helping our communities get through this tough time and being creative. And also want to thank our business and economic development leaders for your ingenuity in helping the business community and just our community in whatever ways you have been doing. Lastly, I just want to say we have one more briefing, so you can also use that opportunity to do a deeper dive. We'll be focusing on the growth part of our economy, which is the innovation economy, and is a great bright spot that we should all be cherishing and supporting going forward. It is on Thursday, November 10th. Is that Thursday? November 10th. What date is that? I should have checked if I said. It's Tuesday, November 10th, the day before Veterans Day. I apologize. We will have a briefing on our innovation economy. So stay tuned, and thank you so much, everyone. I will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. See you soon.
Thanks.